Hey, welcome everyone. This is the second preseason run. We did a test yesterday. Today we're going to try again. I'm hoping to get some good results. If there are some technical difficulties, definitely let me know. I seem to be having an issue getting the Photoshop up. Hey guys, how you doing? Thank you for joining in. I seem to still be having a little technical difficulty here. The Photoshop is not coming up. So hold on to your hats. Let me see if I can go. Guess I just need to check all of this. Mental note. I need to check all of this before I sign on. Make sure we're good to go. Alright, there we go. A few minutes delayed, but how are you guys doing today? Stylo69, Jinhan Labs. Just a brief overcourse as to what I'm trying to do here today. Got about maybe an hour to stream. I got to head out by 11. I'm going to be taking, this is a piece of artwork. It's a double page spread in Teen Titans number 20. It's coming out third week of this month in July. And what I'm doing is I'm taking the double page spread that you see here that's been colored by Marcelo Maiolo. I drew it. Sans the word balloons provided by Adam Glass, the writer. And I'm going to be repurposing it in a way to make it into a print. So herein lies some of the process I did yesterday, where I am redrawing over what is the cloak. In terms of the story, our Teen Titans have infiltrated Brother Blood's cult. They are about to apprehend him and stop a human sacrifice. They snuck into the cult lair under the guise as fellow cult members with these brown-red cloaks, and now they are discarding them and getting ready to go into battle. Someone mentioned to me yesterday, maybe I need to show also the black and white version, which would make sense if you wanted to see the image, how it looks. So here we go. This is what the black and white line art looked like. can kind of gauge. This is a double page spread, so the left half side is page 2, the right half side is page 3. And this is what the colored version looks like that Marcello made his magic. And now I'm going back in and cleaning up, taking away the robes. Getting my setup acclimated here. I actually have a Kindle Fire. I'm running on an iMac and a Cintiq with a Blue Yeti mic. Regular show that I'm hoping to launch in a couple of weeks. I will also have a different setup. I'm going to be going through 2 or 3 different setups. Another one's going to be on the drawing table, where I'm going to be using traditional, pencil, pen on paper, and then also bring those drawings back into Photoshop to render. I think a lot of the artists online tend to be all digital. I'm an old man. I like to draw a pencil on paper. There's a particular tactile feel to that that I still can't get fully from drawing digitally. Although I do a good amount of work. Every page that I draw gets scanned in, and then once it's scanned in, I still do another level of enhancements digitally before I upload the finished file to Marcello. Marcello actually lives in Brazil, near Sao Paulo. I am in Los Angeles, California. So it is a little bit of a trek. Where are you guys based out of? Stylo and Jinhan. By the way, it is extremely hot here in LA. Do you guys hear like a fan in the background? Let me know if you hear something. I'm also curious today. I'm testing to see how loud the AC is. It looks like it's going to be a hot summer here in Los Angeles. And in the studio, I'm going to need to employ something. Otherwise, with Twitch, you gotta wear clothes. Normally, if I'm just drawing by myself, in a tank top, shirtless, underwear. Hope the sound of that doesn't drive you away, but it's kind of how the artist's life is. Also, there's not going to be any music during the stream, so ultimately I like to upload these onto YouTube, so for copyright purposes. There is some music in the beginning. Those are all shared, free beats, courtesy of Rap Chats. But for the stream itself, okay, cool. Fan noise is not that bad. I do have like a buffer thing on the mic, so I'm trying to cover it a little bit. There's also like that foamy thing, whatever you call it, that's on top, to help mitigate some of the noise. I think usually people do that when they're outside, streaming outside. outdoors to cut out the wind. But any help, any kind of comments you guys have, by all means, I am all ears. And I appreciate any kind of input you might want to feel like you want to contribute. The new team, Teen Titans, we have Damian Wayne. He's the leader. He's the guy that's kind of put together this new squad based off of his personal preferences, his GM skills, his superhero GM skills, general manager skills. We have returning somewhat capacity Kid Flash, Wallace West. There's also Red Arrow. And then we have 3 brand new members. There's Roundhouse, the guy in the blue in the middle with blonde hair. He's elemental boy powers. There's Jin, it's spelled Dijin, D-J-I-N-N. She's a genie. And Crush, it's the girl here on the left, far left. It's Lobo's daughter. So Crush has been receiving a lot of very popular fan reaction. This is a little bit different than the Teen Titans you guys might be used to. In terms of the characters, the team. But I think ultimately, hopefully, it'll be just as fun, if not even more. Teen Titans is going to be a little bit more serious than maybe perhaps the cartoon version. There's definitely some pretty cool scenes that are happening in the first few issues. Some pretty much deeper kind of storylines. You guys read comics, I hope. Part of the magic of Twitch is, there's a bunch of other professional comic book artists out here that are streaming some of their work. Most notably, there's Jim Lee, who is perhaps the greatest modern day comic book artist. There's a couple other guys I've been watching personally. Eric Canetti, who's also another extremely popular and talented comic book artist, along with Ryan Benjamin. Ryan is a, what do you say, product of Jim Lee's Wildstorm Homage Studio. The first appearance of the new members. Sorry, I got to get used to also looking up and reading the chats. First appearance is going to be, well, some of that is how do you determine first appearance. There's a Teen Titans special that just came out in June through DC, written by Adam Glass but drawn by Robson Rocha, Robson, yeah. And so there in that issue, it kind of delves into Kid Flash, Damian, and Red Arrow. But my issue, Teen Titans number 20, is going to be the first full issue with the team. And that's where this page is that we're working on today is coming from. So even though it is a slight new direction for the book, we are starting with issue 20. Yesterday we had on Jim Chung. If you guys read comics, Jim just had his book come out last month in June. Man, I can't believe it's already July. It was the number 1 book in June, Justice League number 1. So that's another guy that is also considering streaming. Are there any other particular books that you guys read or follow? I myself have been a comic book fan most of my life. I remember reading comics when I was a kid. I grew up in mostly in Taiwan, and my family immigrated to the States when I was 6. And that first weekend, when we turned on the television, and every channel had cartoons on it, I was in heaven. And one of those cartoons that really gravitated to me was Super Friends. So you can kind of say, you know, I've been a DC fan for quite a while. Although for me, really personally, there's not a lot of differentiation between the companies. You know, there's great characters, there's great stories that span both companies. I don't feel like you have to only root for one or the other. And each company, they all have their own characters, their own titles, and they all kind of tailor towards different audiences. So there's more than enough to share and love. You might hear some birds chirping in the background. That, unfortunately, well, those are my 2 pet birds. I have 2 pet parakeets. Not someone was calling them parakeets the other. Parrotlets. Parrotlets are like miniature parrots. They're only about like this big. Normally around this time, they'd be flying around the house. And they'd be actually a little bit even louder. So, but you might hear them a little bit. They're downstairs. I'm in a 2-level loft space. So Jinha, you're reading mostly Spider-Man in the latest, yeah. That Justice League plus, like, not only Jim Chung, but they got Jorge Jimenez. I mean, that guy is a monster and a beast, and I think definitely, you know, he's relatively newer to the industry compared to myself. I've been drawing comics professionally since 1992. It's maybe even longer than some of you guys have been alive. I'm an old man. I was 20 when I broke in. But yeah, Spider-Man was also one of my favorite books too growing up. Or also Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Another cartoon on Saturday mornings. I mean, cartoons kind of drew me into the comics. And the comics really provided a much deeper love and appreciation for the characters, but also the art form and drawing. Do you guys do a lot of artwork yourself? I think for me, I can remember as long as, excuse me, gosh, when I was 3 or 4. It's probably the earliest memory I have of drawing. And I've been pretty much drawing ever since I was a kid. So you can kind of take a look, again, going back and forth. Later on, when I showcase the traditional drawing, pencil and paper, You guys can check out some of the stuff that the style that I usually work in. Um, I typically draw. Um, I typically draw on the back first of the page. So, I'm just trying to decide how I should do this. I draw on the back of the page, so I draw out the entire figure. Yeah, Spider-Man's Amazing Friends, Firestorm, Iceman. Um, between that and Super Friends, every Saturday morning. Plus, there's like other shows like Thundor the Barbarian. I don't know. There's just a lot. So, anyways, I draw on the back of the board. So I draw everything. So the figures, even though it might not, because it was covered by the cloak, you don't see a lot of that stuff. It's all drawn in the pencil form, so everything, the proportions, for me, all work out. I'm not. Sometimes you might see a drawing, and let's say like the leg might be a little too long because the rest of the leg is hidden behind another figure or something. But in this technique that I use when I'm drawing, it helps eliminate that because you're actually doing the entire drawing, so everything is correct. Now I'm just going back in there and redefining some of the musculature. I think I like to work on also my tone when I'm talking. Seems to be a little too mellow right now. I'm gotta figure something out because it's tough when you're drawing and talking. There's a particular level of concentration that's needed. And to do the whole drawing while you're talking, it's a little challenging. I do hope that with time I'll be able to get used to this. This is a special brush made by Marcelo Maiolo. I cannot give it to you if you request it. You have to ask him. It's a particularly different texture, you might notice. I'm just going in and softening the face a little bit. Do you guys do a lot of drawings, or? I mean, I think you gotta draw as much as you can if that's kind of something that you want to get into. Not every drawing that you do is going to be, hanging in a museum somewhere. I mean, that's a big mistake a lot of young artists make, is that they tend to think everything that they do has to be picture perfect. You're going to have to learn, you're going to grow, and one thing I would suggest is to hold on to your work. That way you can look back over the span of a week or two, or a month, or a year, and kind of gauge your own growth. Some people, like I said, I broke in when I was 20 professionally. I think that's a somewhat slightly or younger age. Most people are in their early to mid 20s. but it's not really also about when you break in, but about the level of quality. So I equate it to kind of an athlete. If you guys watch sports, yeah, there's a lot of good streamers online. I mean, if you guys watch sports, right now there's a summer league going on for the NBA. Most of the guys there are guys that they drafted or didn't draft, but came out of college, or maybe were a year or two in the pros. They're getting to work out some of their skills and trying to get a spot on a team coming up in the fall. But you figure like those guys, they've been playing basketball, most of them, since they were kids. And in some form or another, they were playing ball. And so by the time they got to college, they were already, if your college is 17, 18, you will have enough hours of proper training to then make a college team. And then another year or two of refinement. And most of these guys are coming out, they're 19, 20 years old, getting drafted into the NBA. So a lot of it is because they put in all the hours when they were young. And it's not just also about, if you think about it, it's not just about playing basketball. Some of them are like multi-sport athletes, but it's also about training. It's also about lifting weights, endurance, eating right. All of these different aspects go into your craft. So, what are those aspects in terms of how do they translate to an artist? Well, watching or reading other books, other movies. I would say a big part is also traveling to explore. And a skill set of that is when you travel, you absorb. Hopefully when you're traveling, you're absorbing. When you're reading, you're absorbing. And you're absorbing other things. Sometimes you absorb stuff that you like, but it's also important to be in tune with things that you might not be good at, and then working on those deficiencies. So if you know you're not a good dribbler, well, you're not going to not avoid dribbling. You need to work on certain things. And sometimes those things are not the most fun. Like defense is not very fun. Drawing perspective is not very fun. But those are all necessary skills if your intent is to become a professional artist, illustrator. I was very fortunate when I was young that my mother enrolled me with a tutor. I was growing up in Indiana. So at a very young age, I was already drawing still lifes. Drawing my hands, drawing animals going to the zoo or the park. And those are all kind of necessary things that as you build your skill set, you improve and get better and better. I mean, if you think about it, yesterday I was talking about a book that I was drawing before. The first book that Marcelo, the colorist on Teen Titans, and I worked on together was a book called Demon Knights for DC Comics. And Demon Knights is a medieval genre kind of book. Um, it's kind of a mix of Game of Thrones but with a superhero twist to it. Um, and I was not looking forward to it because one of the things I don't like drawing was horses. And part of that is because I don't get to draw a lot of horses, so I'm not very good at drawing horses. But it was a challenge, and I had to spend extra time sketching on the side, and I still don't think I mastered it. I still think there's some proportional issues if you look back at some of those issues. But towards the end of the run, definitely, I feel like I was having a much better grasp on horses. Because, medieval times, they don't drive around in cars. They ride around on horses all the time. And they ride horses into battle, so you're going to need to draw them in dynamic, exciting poses. And you have to understand the anatomy and the muscle structure of a horse to really get that punch through. But when you're young, now is the time to learn all of these things and to spend, good proportion amount of time learning and developing skills. I'm not saying you have to be a perfect horse draftsman, but basic other things like perspective, buildings, environments, those are all storytelling components that are going to be essential. Perspective is probably the biggest thing. And the quite honestly, perspective is the easiest to learn. Because it's all around you and it's free. You don't even have to take a class to learn perspective. Because you just have to draw your environment, draw your room, draw your bedroom, draw your living room. Go outside, sit on the street corner and draw buildings across the street. Draw a mall, draw a car. They're all things available for you. It's boring. But if you do it, a few times, and you develop a good knack for it, there's actually more career opportunities for people that have really good rendering perspective skills. Drawing humans is the most fun. So that's right, John. Thanks for the support. Yeah, perspective is the first thing that you overlook. And the other aspect of having good perspective in your work or understanding of perspective is that it allows you to choose better camera angles because you're understanding form in a three-dimensional way. I used to teach a class at Art Center College of Design, and I found that a lot of the students weren't able to choose the best camera angles for their panel work because they didn't have a strong perspective sensibility. And the ones that did were able to see it in their heads and translate that down onto the paper. So it's one thing to come up with or think about or have some kind of slight vision towards what you want, the angle, the perspective. But then it's another to be able to have that skill set to translate that from thought and vision onto a physical, tangible piece of paper or digitally on the computer. I mean, it's the biggest, a lot of the questions I used to ask most of the time was, what was your intent and what was the execution? Your intent was to do one thing. Were you able to execute that intent? And if you weren't, you have to be honest with yourself. Then you got to keep trying, keep going back to the drawing table. What do you mean by lenses, John? I'm not sure I quite understand the question. How to depict them in illustration-wise. Yeah, if you can. What do you mean by lenses? Are you asking about like camera angles? How do you How can you choose which angles to use in depicting the story? A lot of that is also how different focal lengths and depths of an image. Yeah, so framing. So okay, yeah. So perspective, like camera angles, different. How do you choose depth and perception? Like a trick that I use, or I don't say trick, but what I tend to tell people to think about is, if you ever seen the movie Matrix, where they're talking and all of a sudden the room turns into like a grid and everything becomes gridded out, the wall, ceiling, and chairs and all that stuff. For me, it's really helpful if you can have that ability to look at a place and see it for a grid. And then once you can do that, then you can apply that into your drawing in a faster way, in a more efficient way, and hopefully get what you want. Yeah, a lot of times what I came across students struggled with was that they had one thing, and you know what, quite honestly, I still go through the same thing. There are times where in my head I want to do a particular angle or something exciting, and it's kind of, I see it, but it's kind of hazy. A lot of times I see the images in my head before I start drawing them, but I see it and it's kind of hazy, but then as I start drawing it, it's not coming out correctly. And some of that is just maybe I have to take a step back, reframe myself, maybe put in some perspective lines to help guide that angle. I know for me, a lot of times I try to do up or down shots, up shots where you're like looking up at a particular human or person or object. It's easier when it's a building or a car because all the lines can kind of converge. But when it's a human and it's a round organic form, it's actually much more difficult. So some of it will just really require a moment to step back, do some preparation work that's necessary for something like that, which would be maybe drawing some perspective lines, and then moving forward, as opposed to trying to just always constantly trying to come up with it out of the top of your head. The quick answer to that is sometimes also there's Google SketchUp. There's other programs now. There's technologies available that you don't have to build the entire thing. You can build shapes that are similar and then move the camera around and really absorb and kind of place yourself into that small environment and look through it. Another technique some artists use, I've used in the past, if you have a toy, a figurine, not one of those wood figures. I hate those wood stick figure that you find in the art store or something. It's, but something similar, like a small toy, and then if you can hold it up and look at it and study it from a different angle, and then you use modern day technology. You take your cell phone and you take a picture of that toy from that particular vantage point. Now you then have an image that you don't have to constantly hold at a weird angle. Now you have a nice image that you can look at on your screen and then try to replicate that. And then the more you do that, the easier it gets. The more efficient it becomes, the more it becomes you're training your muscle memory. So the more you do something, the better you'll be at it. And again, this is not something that you're going to be able to do maybe sometimes the first time. It's going to go through some levels of frustration. You're going to have to work at it and find the technique that best suits you. Sometimes it's going to take someone 2 or 3 times longer to draw something at a particular angle. But just understand that. Set aside the time for that. At the end of the day, you can still pump out something that is, if not more impressive than someone that did it faster than you. So time is not an issue. So today, what I'm doing, actually, for some of the people that just joined lately, this is a double-page spread from Teen Titans number 20. And this is the original piece of artwork. In the story, we have our new Teen Titans members. This is page 2 and 3 of Teen Titans number 20. This book comes out 3rd week of July. This is going to be my first Teen Titans issue, written by Adam Glass, colored by Marcelo Maiolo. This is the black and white line art that I originally did. Originally I drew this pencil and ink on Bristol board, then scanned into the computer. There's some additional touch-ups, like some of these special effects with the lightning bolts and the magic effects and the tattoos. And then it gets uploaded onto a server to my colorist Marcelo, who lives in Brazil. And he does his magic and turns everything to life. You can see there's a tremendous level of work from one stage to the next. Color can really make or break a book. So what I'm doing now too is I'm gonna I really like this image a lot, but and I want to make a print out of it. However, the print is going to be kind of weird within the context of the story. Why are they in the robe and all this stuff? So what I'm doing now is I'm going back and I'm redrawing some of the areas that initially had the cloak, and drawing the figures underneath. And in an effort to maybe use this as a print. So some of these blue lines I've drawn just to figure out the back of the figures, where they are. I don't typically do this very often, mostly because of a time issue. But San Diego Comic-Con is coming up. It's the biggest comic book convention of the year. I'm not doing that many shows this year, so this was something that I had in the back of my mind that I wanted to do, and now I'm forcing myself, trying to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So, any of you going to San Diego Comic-Con, or have been already? My first San Diego Comic-Con was 1992. Back then it was a much smaller show, but it was still the largest comic book convention in the country. Yeah, 2014, it was already becoming pretty big. I think, if I can remember correctly, I would say when the first Spider-Man movie came out with Tobey Maguire, that summer and the years after that was when it really escalated. My first was 92. That's when I was going as a guest. I mean, not as a guest, as a regular convention goer. I had brought my portfolio with me. I'd done about 8 to 10 pages of sample storytelling work. My mentor, Michael Davis, he had a studio called Bad Boy Studio in New York City. I was going to Pratt Institute at the time, and he brought us out. Well, he showed us around. Myself, when I say us, it was myself and John Paul Leon. Some of you guys, if you're into comics, John Paul Leon is one of, if not one of the best comic book artists out there right now. He has a new book out called Batman Creatures of the Night from DC. So John Paul and I, we were like best friends in high school. And we went to college in New York. He went to SVA. I went to Pratt. He met Michael Davis. He introduced Michael to me. And Michael suggested that the two of us put together our portfolio and make a trek out to San Diego to get work. It's kind of funny because you think we were both going to school in New York City at the time. Marvel and DC were located in New York City. Why would we need to come out to San Diego all the way on the other side of the country to get work? But in hindsight, it made a lot of sense. This is where all the comic companies were at under one roof. If we were in New York, we had to make separate appointments to go into separate companies. And even then, a separate appointment, you might only be able to see that one editor that one time, as opposed to, again, at a convention, everyone is under one roof. So it was a great opportunity. On the very last day, we were there for 3 days. On the very last day, on the way out, there was a booth for a company called Valiant, and I had been hearing a lot of buzz about them all weekend at the convention. They had been a relatively new company, new comic book company. And I went to John. I was like, "Hey, John, let's just wait in line and before we go to the airport, let's just wait in line." It's like a 45-minute wait or something. We got nothing to lose, and I showed my work when I waited. I got in front of the line. I got to meet Bob Layton. Bob Layton is another legend in himself. If you guys like Iron Man, Ant-Man, he created all those characters. He's really responsible for the current Iron Man storylines. He took a look at my work. He loved it. And he was like, "Well, when you get back to school in the fall," because they were also located in New York, he said, "Stop by the office. I'll get you some work." But then I said, "Hey, Bob, would you like to hold on to my sample pages?" I had sample pages. Michael told us we needed to have, we brought our original work, but to showcase so you can look at it in a large format. But then we also had photocopy samples to leave with the editors with our name and phone numbers on them and address. There's no email back then. So just name and address. And in case any of the pages get separated, your name and address and phone number on each page. But Bob didn't want to take any samples. So I thought, oh man, that's not a good sign. Because everybody else took samples, except for Bob. Anyways, fast forward another month. This was, I think, in August. San Diego used to be in August. Started school in September. At that time, John Paul and I were up for drawing Static. Michael Davis, along with Dennis Cowan, Dwayne McDuffie, and I think Derek Dingle. They were the four guys that started Milestone, and they launched with 4 books. One of the 4 books being Static, and so it was up to John Paul and myself. We're down to the last 2 guys being considered for the book. They eventually chose John Paul. Um, but they said, hey, Bernard, stop by their studio. They were also located in New York. Milestone was. We'll have some fill-in work for you. Fill-in issue. A lot of people get their first start in comics drawing fill-in issues, which is like right now I'm drawing Teen Titans. Eventually, somewhere along the line, there's going to be a need for a fill-in artist to do one issue, so that I can then jump ahead a little bit, because we always the schedule gets somewhat compressed as we go along. And so when I got up to school, I went up to New York, went into the Milestone office, met with Dwayne McDuffie. Great guy. And he's like, well, unfortunately, because they're still ramping up, they hadn't launched any books yet, there was no work for me. And I was very disappointed, dejected. I was like, man, I have to wait until like maybe November. And November we'll probably have some work for you. They just need to catch up on the books that are launching now. And then they'll have some inventory stories. But I left the office. I was like, I'm not going to wait, man. I'm not going to wait till November. Because then what happens if I waited till November and they're like, well, we still need a few more months. You got to come back in January. So right after the meeting with Dwayne, I went down onto the street, and there was a payphone. A lot of you guys might not remember payphones. There's no cell phones back then. No, well, there were, but they were like these huge bricks, and they cost a ton of money. And I was in college. I had no money. So, got on the payphone. I called up Bob from Valiant, Bob Layton. I said, hey, Bob, this is Bernard. Remember we met a month ago in San Diego? And he's like, oh, yeah. When can you stop by the studio? The office, Valiant office. I think this was a Monday. I said, Wednesday I can come back. So, quarters forever. Yes, exactly. Quarters. It used to be a dime, then it went up to 25 cents. You could talk for like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, then you had to add another quarter or 10 cents. Some of those phone booths were pretty nasty too. I mean, it wasn't a complete phone booth. They did have those, where Superman used to go inside and then change and then fly out. They also had the other ones that were just kind of freestanding, that had like a little thing that blocked the sides. And everybody used, phone booths, public phones. So it was a little, you had to wipe them down before you used them. So Bob was like, come in Wednesday. I went in Wednesday. I brought in some work. I said, hey, Bob, in the last month since we met, I've redrawn a bunch of my sample pages based on some of the comments that you made and some of the other editors. Maybe you'd like to take a look. He flipped through them. He's like, oh, this is great. Pulls out a script or plot. It's like, all right, we got a plot for you here. You're going to do the fill-in issue for Barry Windsor Smith on Archer and Armstrong. So I was like, wow. My first work right away. And that's kind of how it started. So I've been very fortunate. Definitely Michael Davis. And then having met Bob became my mentor at Valiant. It's like a second father to me. Took me under his wing. And help guide me and instruct me. I used to walk around with a whole bunch of quarters in your pocket. It's funny, man, because now, you have change, but it used to be you put it in your car for meters, but now meters, even most of the parking meters here in LA take credit cards now. And I actually prefer using credit cards just so I have a record of how much I'm spending. Do a little accounting at the end of the year. How much I'm spending on expenses, travel expenses. So we're actually going to be wrapping up pretty soon. I got to go play in a basketball league. Play in a basketball league Sunday mornings. I want to thank you guys for joining me today. I will probably be streaming again maybe like tomorrow or Tuesday. I'm going to be testing a couple different setups. I want to try to finish this this print. I need to finish it actually by next week sometime, because we have to allocate enough time to get the sucker printed. So my favorite NBA team is the Miami Heat, hands down. And this is a story I can tell next time. When I was in high school, I was a ball boy for the Miami Heat. This was their first 2 years of their franchise, 1988, 89, and 89-90. And so I have a pretty interesting life. I mean, I don't ever take it for granted. But yeah, Miami Heat. A couple of friends are in Vegas right now watching the Summer League games. I was supposed to go, but I had to stay home and work. But yeah, Miami Heat. I don't like the Lakers. The Lakers are literally right across the street from me. I live downtown LA. I don't like the Lakers. I don't like the Clippers. I root against them. But we'll see. But thanks again, guys. I hope you guys hit that follow button so you know when I'm going to be back on again. Again, probably right now, preseason, what I'm dubbing as preseason, trying to get out all the bugs so that when I do launch officially, which will probably be in the middle of July, I'm looking at maybe the Tuesday right before San Diego. I'll have a little bit more of a polished show for you guys. I've broken it down so far into 3 or 4 different segments. First segment, I'm going to be doing like a time pencil sketch. Those I'll be giving away to viewers on the stream. Then I'm going to jump to a kind of a long, what I'm calling a long form drawing, which is probably going to be like a commission piece or a piece for print. And that's going to be a piece that's going to take maybe a couple of streams to finish. That's going to be a complete from pencils to inks to color. So you get to see that progress each time you come back. I'm also going to be bringing on maybe some other artist friends of mine, or just friends in general that have a love for comics. Do a little interview. Talk to them about kind of their experience in comics and art. Get them to stream. And maybe also do some fun things like a sketch battle, or draw your way out or something like that. Stuff that you play at bars. There is a mature setting on this, I think. And then one other surprise thing, can't announce it yet, but something I think might be kind of fun and keep guys coming back. And also give you guys a stake in what I'm doing. So, thanks again, and look forward to seeing all of you back and more next time.